Welcome to episode 6 of the Bulls REKAP Podcast. I'm Joe Cowley. You could follow me at Cowley Hoops on Twitter, or you could read me in the Chicago Sun-Times in the sports section, obviously, Bulls beat reporter. And look, this is an important time in the season because this is like the first kind of wellness check that general managers do with the team. Usually it's about 500 minutes for a player or 20 to 25 games for your team. Obviously, the Bulls are 10 and 15, so they're at that 25-game mark. So why not bring in one of the hardest-working guys in the business, Dave Kaplan?
What's up, my guy? How are you?
Good. How you doing, buddy?
I'm doing awesome. Really enjoying all of your work, the Vooch interview and the story about the train crash. Oh, my God. I was like sitting in my driveway going, this is incredible.
Yeah, it was like out of the movie Unbreakable. Obviously, not to diminish Hollywood movies with what Vooch went through real life, but the fact that he came out of it with just kind of a banged up shoulder, and his dad came out of it. And meanwhile, it wasn't like they were in a car that was like way back there. I mean, they had to dig through rubble, and I mean, it was it kind of you hear a lot of NBA guys say, I don't belong here, I should never be here. When you hear Vooch's story, if he says that ever, which he never does, I mean, he's actually lived it. So it was good to get him on. And I like talking about the USC days when he had little Romeo there, and what a circus that must have been. So,
and my closest friend in the world for a long, long time was Kevin O'Neill, who was his coach in college.
There you go. So, I mean, that was a crazy 2-year window for USC with DeMar and Vooch and just everything going on. And obviously the football program is what it is, but for a couple of years, the basketball program kind of was capturing all the attention in SoCal. So that was cool. So, hey, I mean, you know this game as far as the scouting aspect and all that stuff. And the thermometer around the league right now, when you talk to people, the Zach contract, things aren't changing. As great as he's been, both on and off the court, dealing with us, being a teammate. I mean, it's a completely different guy than the last couple of years, where he was almost starting to become kind of Hollywood and signing with Clutch Sports and looking at it as a business. But that doesn't mean that there aren't some exciting things going on with this team. So why I wanted to have you on is just kind of break down these individual players, kind of go through like the main rotation guys, what we're seeing from these guys, how movable they are, and kind of get your thoughts on, would you move him, or is this a guy, obviously there's no unmovables on this team. But at the same time, there's some guys that are interesting rotation pieces that you want to keep, even if you somehow keep that first round pick and it's protected and you land a dude, you still need pieces around him to, for him to become a dude and stuff like that. So, the obvious thing is right now, all indications are the league is waiting to see what happens with Jimmy Butler, and the league is waiting to see what happens with Brandon Ingram. Those are the two main dominoes. But I think the guy we talked about, Nikola Vucevic, has gone from a contract that you were kind of shaking your head at last year to now you look at it, $20 million this year, $21 million next year, and then it's expired. I mean, you're telling me he doesn't fit in the Lakers and let AD kind of move out to that 4 that, he doesn't like to bang and be that 5. And then they send the D'Angelo Russell contract here, and that's an expiring contract. I mean, so let's start with Vooch. Where do you think he's at, and how realistic you think it is moving him?
Well, first of all, I think he deserves tremendous credit for how hard he worked in the offseason with Peter Patton and the player development staff, because you just see a different guy, not just in confidence in how he shoots the ball. His form looks better. I've always been a guy that taught shoulders over toes, elbow in, and it's got to be second nature. Ball hits your hand, it's got to be gone. This guy is like a different shooter. It's unbelievable to watch. I like when the offense runs through him.
Absolutely.
And I thought when they had, and this is not a shot at DeMar or Zach, I don't want anyone to take it that way, but like he was trying to figure out, how am I getting my touches with these two guys? And I thought the Bulls hung on to that threesome too long. If I'm the Lakers, even the Celtics, I mean, if I can get Nikola Vucevic, oh, dude, He's in great shape, takes great care of his body. He's a winning type player. He's a great person. I would trade for him in a second. I think he can be a really big piece.
Yeah, I think obviously possibly there could be a couple of injuries, but I think even at the present climate, because there are so few teams that seem to actually be interested in going for it this year, I think he's going to be a big had once we see what happens with Jimmy, once we see what happens with Ingram, obviously. The guy that I've heard from the beginning of the year, as long as he's healthy, Lonzo Ball. I mean, he's the only guy playing plus. I think he's had one game. I mean, obviously we're talking about 8-9 games, so I know it's a small sample size, but you're talking about one game where he was in the minus and plus minus, and people can read. I'm a plus minus guy because I think, not just for one game. You look at one game, anybody can be good or bad plus minus, but overall, plus minus is how the team is functioning time and time again with you out there. And the fact that he's plus 27 total for a team that has so many minuses on it, and the minutes he's given and the defense he's playing, I thought there was going to be a tentativeness with the knee to attack screens and pick and rolls and to kind of blow up screens like he and Caruso did so well. You can't tell me a top 10 team in the NBA right now where he doesn't come in with an expiring contract and make their bench and their second unit way better. I mean, to me, he could win you a championship if you get him.
Yeah, if he stays healthy and that knee is what it looks like it is, and I mean, he better take care of his doctors at Christmas because holy cow, did they do a great job on him. Right. And then he worked hard in his rehab. He's an outstanding passer. He can make 3-point shots, and I think you're exactly correct. And I think what's so good about him is not just his on-ball defending, but if you watch him at the point of contact on screens, I think you made a great point. There's no tentativeness there.
No.
He's going to blitz a ball handler. He's going to come through when they're trying to pick him off at the top of the key. That dude's playing with aggressiveness. I could not be more impressed. And he's another guy that a team trying to win a championship, that's a guy I'd like to have.
Zach LaVine. Here's what I'm going to say about Zach LaVine. Like Zach LaVine, he's always been respectful of what I do. I've always been respectful of what he does. I always say Zach's the kind of guy you want to marry your daughter. You just don't want to max contract him if you're an NBA owner. They did. So we're stuck in that quicksand. Zach and I had a nice little man-to-man talk probably about 4 weeks ago in Atlanta, and he was upset with some of the things that I'd been writing and saying and stuff. So we talked about it. And that's the thing about Zach. He's a great kid. He's a regular dude. But for him to say, hey, I approached him. I said, I heard you're pissed, but let's talk about this because, I mean, obviously we have to see each other every day. And I just don't like having those relationships. I've had some, the Boozer and I relationship was terrible and Jabari and obviously Derrick Rose. Those are just not good relationships, but they were all workable. But I give Zach credit because he seems to understand that the boat was going this way on his reputation, both on the court and off the court the last couple seasons, and he's reeled it back in. And this is a guy who all you need to know is he's the one that's saying, let me guard him. Let me guard Donovan Mitchell. Let me guard Anthony Edwards. That was never something Zach would say. He'd always be like, I got to get my offense. I'm not going to wear my ass off doing, playing defense against these elite guys. The fact that he's willing to do that tells me that he is now taking this serious. And I think he knows that his contract might not be movable this year. But my point is, if they can move Vooch and they can move Lonzo, they can wait on Zach. That 26 class is loaded. You don't have to – they'll be bad enough without those two that they'll keep that protected top 10. The nice thing is they have a guy that is now – he's a volunteer and he's not a hostage.
That's a good way to put it. I've never heard it quite framed that way. I've been impressed with his willingness to – he's not just standing there, I'm here. He gets down and he looks like he really is trying to give you – expend effort defensively. Look, he's an elite athlete. He's an elite slasher going to the basket. He obviously is a great athlete. He can knock down threes with the best of them. I just never saw a guy where I went, that's a winning type player, man. That guy's a grinder. He'll do whatever it takes, run anybody over to win. I got my numbers. Well, that's all that mattered. I would rather a guy say to me, yeah, I went 0 for 4 today at the plate, if we use a baseball analogy, but guess what? We won, and I hit
Right.
behind a runner twice. He wasn't that guy. Again, it's early. It's December 9th or 10th when you and I are taping. To this point, he has taken to heart the criticisms from you being there every day. I say it all the time as well. Dude, are you a winning player or are you just a guy with a max contract? There's a big difference.
Yeah, and I like the fact that I think he is attempting to become a two-way player. I don't think he's ever going to be, but, like you brought up, his athleticism, one-on-one, just a straight line, you're not going to blow by him. I mean, you're going to blow by Josh Giddey. You're going to blow by some of these other guys. You're not blowing by Zach. His problem has always been when the ball rotates, where does he get lost in the rotation? Does he understand communication, how to rotate instead of just fouling the ball like a puppy? So, which brings us to Josh Giddey. My fear is that Arturas Karnisovas falls in love with his moves a little too much.
Agreed.
And I can't see them saying, we're going to trade Alex Caruso, not get a draft pick back, just get Josh Giddey, and then walk away from Josh Giddey after 1 year. So it comes down to what's the price for Josh Giddey. You're not going to trade Josh Giddey because the league knows that contract is coming. That extension is coming. My hope is that Arturas says, let the market dictate his price. We're not going to sign him. Let him become the restricted free agent like they did with Zach years ago, the old regime. Let the market set the price like Sacramento did back in the day with Zach. And then we'll decide if it's worth matching. The problem is I think they're almost in a no. I just don't see AK letting him walk away, and he's not tradable with the way he's playing right now.
Yeah, look, I get that they liked him, and he's got a lot of skills to like.
Right.
My question is, my problem with Arturas and Mark Eversley is I call them the settlers because they'll settle or that guy has great athleticism. Let's take a shot. Patrick Williams in one move begets the next move. And I remember asking Arturas, dude, you need a point guard like a starving man needs a sandwich. Why don't you take Tyrese Halliburton? Oh, we had a great interview with him, a great workout. We really like him, but we're swinging for the fences. The grand slam is Patrick Williams. Yeah, that's like drafted John Theory back in the day for the Bears. Oh, he benched 1 billion times. He jumped faster or higher. He ran faster. He couldn't play football. And the fact of the matter is, if you took Halliburton, you never waste the money that you blew on Lonzo Ball. One move begets the next move.
Yep.
That's why. Bazelis looks like he's going to be a nice player. Maybe he becomes a superstar. You need shooting. And this team never wants to address shooting. You've got the kid Max Strus. He'd like to be a Bull. Now let him out the door. He would have signed anything when he was hurt. He would have come back. Now you have Dalton Connect sitting on the board. You don't take him. That dude's a stud as a shooter. I just don't think they know how to construct a roster. That's my problem.
Connect was in my original mock draft the night that the lottery came out. I did like first 14 picks, and I had Connect going to the Bulls. I was like, yeah, wow. Oops. Let's put Ayo and Kobe in the same kind of boat. They both have unbelievably reasonable contracts. Mm-hmm. To me, they're not all-stars. I think Kobe is a cusp all-star player. Yep. I think Ayo would have to do a little bit more, but Ayo's the most willing two-way player they have in that backcourt.
He's a glue guy. You win with guys like that.
Yeah. If they have to get included, I mean, say some team comes big with, okay, we'll take Zach, but we also want Ayo or Kobe and obviously the Bulls would be taking a ton of bad contracts back that would be expiring, hopefully, with the draft pick. But say that happens. I don't know how it would because you just don't see the money for that. Would you be willing to part with one or two of those, or are you sold that, hey, we have to keep, as an organization, speaking as AK, we have to keep Ayo and Kobe? They're essential pieces.
No, they're not essential. Like if I could totally move Zach's contract and clear the decks where finally we're going to do a rebuild. Now, I don't know if those are the dudes I want doing my rebuild, but that's a different discussion. Look, I like Kobe. I like Ayo. They work hard. They're good guys. They're good players. But if I have to move one or both of those to get that horrific contract and turn the page and keep my draft pick, for me, it's a no-brainer.
Yeah. I don't think anybody would come and just offer a high draft asset for one or both of them. So for them to move, they'd have to be included in a package. I mean, I couldn't see somebody just saying, we'll give you a protected first for Kobe, like a high-level team, playoff team. So it wouldn't be a high pick, obviously, but I don't see that coming down the lane. Another guy we already brought up, Patrick Williams, the big enigma, as I like to call him. The sad thing is, for like about 10 days before he got hurt with the left foot, before it flared up again with this brutal November schedule that they played, again, we get teased. It's like a tease every time with him. You kind of get sucked in. And you go, he's rebounding. He's flashing. He's cutting to the hoop. He's putting the ball on the ground and not turning it over. So there's always those little flashes he gives you. The 5-year, what is it, $90 million contract, $18 million a year. It's not unreasonable for a 3-and-D guy, but I just don't. I mean, if someone came and knocked on my door, and obviously December 15th, when half of these guys that sign their summer deals can be traded. But if someone came and knocked on my door about P. Will and they wanted to give up one of their young problems, I'd investigate it. As many tools are there, I would investigate it.
And I've been screaming since they drafted him. Again, I said to you a little while ago, I was before the draft, not after the draft, begging them to take Tyrese Halliburton because they needed a guy like that. They didn't. Okay, so now you've got Patrick Williams. I have always said, he's 18, let him develop. Well, he got hurt.
Right.
He was 19, let him Okay, at some point, you got to go, you are what you are. Yep. Like, I've given you plenty of time. You have a ton of injury history. And for whatever reason, I just don't see that, whether you like Zach or not, boy, that guy's going to attack the basket. That guy is looking to hunt shots. I don't think Patrick Williams has got that oomph.
That dog. He's not a dog.
I need an MFer, man. That guy's a killer. That's
that
what
body,
I need.
If he had like that Josh Hart in him with that kind of build, come on.
Different story.
So look, he's back full practice this week, so that's good news from the left foot injury. So we'll see how that goes. I think they're going to monitor him and keep him on a minutes restriction, just for the simple fact of, that's the left foot they had surgery on, and the fact that the grind of that November schedule put some soreness in it. It could have been scar tissue. He's just kind of breaking through, but is at least a little bit concerning. But that's something to watch. Where are you at with Julian Phillips and Dalen Terry? I'll say this. I didn't think Dalen Terry was an NBA player for the first year and a half,
Agreed.
2 years of watching him. I will say this year, he does have a rotation, and that's all he'll ever be, a rotation guy, because I think he now understands my role is to come in. I was talking to him one day. I go, it feels like you've embraced just coming in and causing havoc. Just you just are the guy that goes in and just tries and wreck things for 7 minutes if that's your stint. And he's like, yeah, that's a good way of putting it and stuff. I think he's gotten over the fact that he's not going to be a starter. He's not going to be the sixth man. But I do think he and Julian both bring something off the bench that's valuable. I would include both of them in a major trade if a team asks for it. But I do like the fact that I have seen development from those two where you say, okay, they're both NBA players. They're not elite. They're not great. But where are you with those two?
I mean, they're okay. I agree with you that Dalen Terry has gotten better than I ever thought he would.
Right.
When I first watched him, I went, wow.
His shot. You talk about the fundamentals of a shot. Even Billy, I talked to Billy about this one day. I go, basically, it almost looks like, his hand was here. It's almost like Joe Keem when he shot it, except he didn't spin it as much. But the hand was coming off way outside, and Billy and Patton and all those guys have really worked with him. He looks, especially these three, looks more like a form shot.
Yeah, I mean, the first time I watched him play, I literally went, man, if I wrote up a report and said take that guy 18th overall, I'm losing my gig. I'm like, that guy? He's gotten better. I hear he's a really good kid. He works
He's
hard.
great. He's hilarious. He's hilarious in the locker room.
Is he like your 8th, 9th guy? Yeah, that's fine. He'll develop into that, get a little stronger. But boy, oh boy, the front office of the Bulls has been so underwhelming to me. It's literally amazing.
Yeah. Yeah, they've missed on, I'd say Io by far is their best draft pick, which brings us to this guy finally, Modest Buchelis, the rookie. Here's what I'll say about him. I remember, I'm not comparing him to Lauri Markkanen. I think they have different skill sets. Lauri had a way better touch from outside. Lauri, when you looked at Lauri, his build from behind, you saw like the V. With Modest, you see an I. It's an I still, So they're built different. But what I will say is they're both a lot more athletic than you'd think. We've come into practices like twice in the last week, and Modest is just doing dunks. And I'm talking like crazy ass dunks that you see on like mixtapes from back in the day where it's behind the back, hit it with your elbow, put it back in this hand in one hand. I mean, his athleticism is off the charts.
It is.
So I'm not saying he's untouchable, but I'm saying at 6'10", he can put it on the floor. He's a willing defender. He has to get stronger, but I think he can actually turn into a really good defender in the front court, which the Bulls haven't had many of those in a long time. I'm kind of excited about him as a Robin if they could find a Batman. And again, that's looking way down the line, but I think he could be a Robin. I don't think he could be your number one guy. He's not that dude, but he could be a dude.
Okay, let me ask you a question. If I told you the Lakers called, I'm not saying they would, we'll give you Dalton Connect for him right now, would you do it?
If I knew that my team was going to stay this way and the philosophy of this team was going to stay this way of shooting threes and playing high pace, and I couldn't move Zach and I couldn't move Vooch and I'm kind of stuck with this, I may do it. But if I know that I'm moving off of some of these guys with the hopes of getting in that lottery, I
don't need.
No, that's a great question because shooters are so coveted, and it's only going to get more and more and more because of the way teams are playing. And a lot of people are ripping the NBA right now that all it is threes and dunks. On the surface, if that's how you want to look at it, that's fine. But to me, there's some serious coaching going on because you have to generate how to find those threes now. Because everybody can guard the three and rotate. How are you going to generate to keep teams off balance, get the corner three, which is the best three you want? And so that's where the coaching is. There's still a lot of coaching going on. And Modest has just so much raw tools.
He does.
That's a tough one. What would you do?
If I was going to tell you that if you're blowing it completely up and we want to suck and be in the top, part of the lottery, I don't really need a shooter then. And I'd rather try and develop an 18-year-old that has height, sick athleticism, and maybe, just maybe, I stumble into a really good player. I don't think you're looking at, the next Jokic. I think you're looking at a solid basketball player. If you tell me, man, we got to get in the play-in and try and find a way to keep that, that's in their philosophy, then I'd take the shooter. But if I'm blowing it up, 100%. Let me just tell you this. When they drafted Dalen Terry, you know who the next pick in the draft was?
I'm trying to think. Who went to 19? Who was it?
Christian Brown from Denver. He only averaged 15 points a game this year.
Yeah.
5 boards, 2 assists. Yeah, I would love to have that guy.
It's funny in talking to Vooch when I talked to him, and one of the things that went on earlier this year, we were in the locker room, and Dalen's funny. He just loves cutting guys down and stuff like that. And it's funny, but these young guys, they don't know how the team was constructed. They don't know how Vooch got here or what.
No idea.
So we were talking, and like Dalen had no idea that the Bulls could lose their first round pick if they finish out of the lottery. It's or out of the top 10. It goes to San Antonio. And he's like, why do we got to do that? And I'm like, well, that's why your stepdad that was here, DeMar DeRozan, who basically raised you, that's how he got here because of that trade. Well, when are we done paying for that deal? And I'm like, that would be it. And I'm like, the Vooch deal is done. And he looked at Vooch. He goes, "What do we have to give for you?" He had no clue. And Vooch was like, Carter and Wendell Carter Jr. and first 2-round picks. Well, who are the picks?
Franz Wagner.
So Jet Howard was one of them who hasn't worked out yet. He's young, and the other one's Franz Wagner. And Dalen looks at Vooch and goes, "We could have had Franz Wagner instead of you because you got to get the hell out of here, Vooch." And Vooch started laughing. And Vooch even brought up a good point. He goes, "First of all, no one knows if the Bulls are going to draft Franz Wagner, But the other point, which is probably the most important, even if they did, would he have developed like he did in Orlando? Because this
now with Peter Patton, I think things are better.
Right.
The Bulls, even under Pax and Gar, never gave you enough in terms of assets to develop guys. It was like a big deal that they signed Sean Respert. What?
Jimmy Butler developed himself.
He did.
Even Tibbs used to say, I'd lie to you if I said I had any hand in Jimmy becoming the offensive player he became. That was Jimmy. And I think Kobe, there's some of that with Kobe too. I give Kobe a lot of credit for going into the lab and covering up as many warts as he could. He still got to work on his defense, but he knows that. And I think he's a willing worker to try and do that. Last thing before I let you get out of here, Cap, this front office, to me, this is the most important year for them. And it's easy to say, well, the last year is always the most important year. But I mean that as far as they've shown they can flip it once back in and I think it was a good flip. I think when you look at their record before Lonzo got hurt, and I think we're all seeing how essential Lonzo is to a team right now in his limited minutes, what he does and the winning basketball he plays. But I think they never recovered. It seemed like they didn't have a plan B or a C or even a D. So that's my knock on them. But the fact that they showed that they can build a team and understand team building gives me hope that they now understand the importance of going through team pain, because that's what it's going to take to get where you need to go through. They need to go through some pain now. Do you think it's in them, or is the fear, and it might not even be them, it might be just some suit walking around that has a minority stake in this team saying, no, asses in the seats is more important. Keep this thing as is. So to me, this is the most important year for Arturas and Mark Eversley. You agree with that?
100% agree with you. And if some suit, whoever that is, decides it's more important to have butts in the seats, then they should sell the team. Then they don't care about winning. I just watched an interview with Steve Cohen, and the guy said to him, when you bought this team, I mean, do you treat it like you're being philanthropic? He said, 100%. That's why I bought the team. If I can make millions of people happy and we can win, I'm not in this to make money. That isn't the philosophy of any owner in Chicago.
No. Is this the darkest days of Chicago sports right now?
Holy cow. I mean, you weren't around here. I was in the 70s when the Bears were horrific pre-Peyton. The Cubs, the White Sox, the Bulls were not good. They had moved on.
They were a punchline, yeah.
And the Hawks were okay. So there was not the social media scrutiny we have today and all the TV.
Right.
So I would say this might be the worst time I've seen in a long time.
I have to remind everybody, we are in a major market. It's really unbelievable.
Right. They treat it like we're in Kansas City.
Bunch of mom and pop stores. Just
horrible.
Yeah.
Horrible.
Cap, thanks, buddy. I like checking in with you every once in a while, especially on a week like this where we're kind of at that first quarter mile. Things start kind of buzzing in the NBA. You can kind of self-scout, evaluate your players. So thanks for hopping on.
Tell my guy Billy D, I've known him since 1992. Tell him I said hello. I'm a big fan of his. And keep killing it, man. I listen every day. The podcast is awesome.
Thanks, buddy. I appreciate it.
Appreciate you.
All right, Dave Kaplan. Like having him on. We do have a lot of similar takes, but I mean, he's just a guy that gets it, so that's always good. Hey, all right, let's go to Cowley Island rant that I kind of touched on when I was talking to Cap. The coaching that's going on right now. And look, everybody knows I'm a Tibbs guy, and I think it's pretty hilarious that people are looking at Cat now and going, wow, look at Cat. The Knicks really needed Cat. or Pussycat, as I like to call him. Look at the way he's balling. Let me tell you something about Mr. Cat, Karl Anthony Towns. And again, he was a young kid at this time, but when he played in the Timberwolves with Jimmy Butler, this dude was more worried about Fortnite and his gaming system and making sure he could get in the hotel after the game and not watch film and just play his Fortnite video game. This is a guy that Minnesota became so distraught with his unwillingness to play like a 7-footer, and with all that skill set, instead wanting to be a 7-foot guard, that they had to go and overpay for Rudy Gobert, who they're still going to be paying for a long time, obviously. This is a guy that Minnesota, as good as they were last year, said, meh, we don't want you anymore. Your contract is such that we don't think the juice is worth the squeeze. Well, where can we send you? Where can you go where all of a sudden you could be playing at your best basketball? Well, let's see. Nate Robinson, Augustine, Derrick Rose MVP year, Joakim Noah, 4th in MVP voting, Defensive Player of the Year, Jimmy Butler's defense, Luol Deng, who people couldn't figure out what to do with him until Tibbs could. Now let's go to New York. Brunson. People want to say, well, Brunson was kind of a volcano ready to erupt. Well, guess who helped erupt it? Tom Thibodeau. Hart, OG, and now Cat. You play under Tom Thibodeau, you will play the best basketball of your career. And for people in this city of Chicago to still be critics of Tibbs, too many minutes, even though last year Billy played his guys more minutes than any Tibbs guy. It's not even close. DeMar, Vooch, I think they were both higher minutes than any New York Knick. So that narrative is BS. The fact that people in Chicago that still want to take shots at Tibbs, just watch the Knicks. Watch the guys he's collected, but most importantly, watch the way Karl Anthony Towns is playing. He's playing the best basketball he's ever played, and that's because of one guy, Tom Thibodeau, one of the top 3 coaches in the NBA. That's Cowley Island. Finally, I like to do a list every week. So this is an interesting one. I went through the bottom 10 teams. Bulls are included in that. Cooper Flagg. Where would he look good? Where would it work? Where would it be horrendous if he went? Let's go through it. The Wizards. It wouldn't be as bad as you would think. I don't mind Cooper Flagg going to the Wizards because I know they're going to tank for 26 and try getting another dude to go along with them. The Pelicans. Awful idea. You can't trust Zion. They can't move him. They're probably going to move off Ingram. I don't know where they're going. The arena is stale. I don't want to see Cooper Flagg in New Orleans. Utah. I mean, with Lowry marketing, that's interesting. But again, who really cares about Utah Jazz basketball? Toronto. That's basically Utah of the North. No one cares about Toronto basketball. Charlotte. This one is interesting. Brandon Miller, LaMelo Ball. You have your backcourt. Then you get your front court guy who was just playing down the road from you. Wouldn't mind that one. That one doesn't suck. Philly would be the best, but I think Philly's going to play their way out of the bottom 10. But to have Cooper Flagg, and now all of a sudden Philly has options. Do we really want to keep investing in Joel Embiid? Do we want to try trading him down to Miami so he can play with Jimmy Butler? I mean, that would give them options. Portland, I think Portland, as well as I think they're playing overachieving this year, Scoot Henderson hasn't done it. I just don't. I'm not. And it looks like they're going to try blowing it up and trade guys. I don't want them in Portland. You don't see their games. I don't care. Detroit, no. Nobody flourishes in Detroit since the 1990s. The Bulls. Look, I don't want to be biased, but Cooper Flagg in a Bulls uniform with Modest and then whatever little pieces you keep, Io, Kobe. I mean, you got something. You got something. That would be a very good look. And I'm not saying it because I cover the Bulls, but that'd be a hell of a look. And if Modest's defense keeps coming and Cooper Flagg, who is probably one of the most willing two-way players, and then finally the Pacers. No. I don't want Cooper Flagg in Indiana. I don't want him in Hoosier basketball because it's too cliche. It's too movie script. You know, Great White Hope goes to Indiana to save Hoosier basketball. No, I don't want to see that. And then he'd have to be coached by Jim Boylan. So he'd be ruined within a year or so. That's it. Thanks for listening. Again, you can check me out at the Chicago Sun-Times. And remember, I got next.